Okay, so today I have a Geoguessr country streak. I'm going to explain my thought process to try and help people when they're doing country streaks. Okay. Okay, so the first one is pretty obvious. It's Uganda because of the car. And this one, it's Brazil. I can tell by the colour of the soil and the sun being in the north. This one, small dashed lines and the look of the village down there, it's Spain. Uh, Here it's easy, the writing is Korean, so South Korea. Uh, this one was quite tricky. The feel of the landscape with the yellow dashed lines at the side and the poles uh, made me think it was similar to Andorra, but not quite Andorra. So I went near Andorra in Spain. But it was the other side in Galicia, near to Galicia. Okay, for round 6, there's a black car and Spanish writing with white road lines. So that's Argentina. This one is Gen 2 and an African feel, so that has to be South Africa. This one, the yellow and white lines and the yellow ballad, you can see me pointing at, is Uruguay. Here, the bollards, you see, black caps and white on the back, which is Slovenia. Here, this one, you can see some very small dashed lines, which are typical in France. This next round, uh, the general feel of it, and you'll see there's some Spanish there, and you'll see the sun is quite central, but sort of to the south, and it felt like the Yucatan Peninsula. Here, this one, you can see the street sign Via Togliatti, which is Italian. Okay, this one was the first one I took my time on. Right beneath us, you can see two Volvos, and the general feel of it feels like Sweden, but I wanted to find some better evidence to back up my idea. So I'm checking all the writing I can find. I'm checking the street signs here. And on this van at the bottom, I see a .se, which is Sweden, in Helsingborg. This sign we see here says RA, which is a Quebecois sign. Here we see a quite concrete road and white lines, and this number plate is Malaysian on the Sarawak region. Here I can see some Polish writing, so it's quite obviously Poland. I'll just have a check around. Here we have Gen 4 coverage, and this bollard with a grey back and a red front with the black cap. It's an Austrian bollard, and that sign in the distance is Austrian too. Here we see some language and the script, uh, or the font. It's Italian, up towards Turin. Here the general feel of the architecture and the long grass makes me feel Southeast Asia, and the language on that building looks more Indonesian. There's a lot of bikes everywhere, which is quite typical of Indonesia too. And it was on Sulawesi. Here we can see a black car at the bottom and quite barren landscape. You see the sun is in the north too, so that makes me think Argentina. Here this round you can see the Mongolian car. I check in Erdenet because it looks like the same car from there, but the city almost feels too big. I spend a few seconds looking and just guess, but it was Ulaanbaatar. Here we see Locam, which can only be in two countries, Switzerland and Japan, and this one felt much more like Japan than Switzerland. Here we see some Afrikaans writing and a street saying Voortrekker, which is a South African thing, and we see Gen 2 coverage there too. Here we have Locam again, and the yellow rear plates is Japan. Here we have Gen 4 coverage and a lot of orange roofs. And in the distance there, you can see Loures and Alverca, which are towns I recognise in Portugal. I spend a bit of time looking around, trying to find them. So I'll let this play for a bit. Eventually I do give up and just place my gas down and move on. Okay, this next round was something I just had a gut feeling about, and I'd seen similar roads before and had very little evidence, so I zoom in and I just guess France, and it happens to be France. I was quite happy with that. We see the sun to the north and a black car again, and this landscape feels a lot more Chilean, so I went towards the border, towards the south, and it was almost right on the border. Here we have a bit of writing here which looks like Tagalog. I wasn't too sure on it, and a concrete road which points me to the Philippines, so I eventually guess it. This round initially confused me because the architecture feels a lot more Alpine and more Austrian. I see this bollard here, and I see the plate too. So I zoom into Albania at first, but then I take full notice of this front plate, which is short, and I remember there's the Germanic part of Sub-Zero in Italy, which could possibly look like this. And I see it's an Italian street sign. Here we see some Spanish writing and this yellow and black pole and these yellow plates which all point me towards Colombia. And it was Colombia. So for this one I see the follow car in Nigeria. It's quite simple. This one I can see some Korean script and a Korean road number, which I get very close to. Here was quite a confusing one, because my initial thoughts were South America. But I recognise this turning sign, and I see a man driving on a moped on left-hand drive, and it clicks that the sign is Indonesia. Here's probably my favourite round of all of them, and it takes me quite a while to get, so I'll try and explain my thought process as I go along. So we see the sun in the south, and it feels a lot more European. I'm trying to read this sign to see if I can get any script off it, but I couldn't tell whether it was either Latin or Cyrillic script. So I keep looking. That sign on the left doesn't really feel too Western European. And I'm trying to see if there's any car colour there. My thoughts here were mainly Russia or Ukraine, so I was looking to see if there was a red or black car. But I keep looking at this sign. The flora as well feels quite Eastern European. And it clicks with me eventually that I've seen a sign similar to this in Slovakia, around in the mountains in the east. So I keep looking and then zoom into Eastern Europe and look at this again. Which I couldn't read still. And with the coverage here, it didn't seem like a main road, so I ruled out Ukraine and Russia completely at that point. So I just click in Slovakia. And at this point I have nothing to lose, so I just guess, and you can tell with the screen shaking I was very happy with this. And for this next one, it took a bit of time too. Okay, so here you can see some Spanish, and the sun is to the south. So immediately I'm thinking Mexico, but I want some more evidence for it. And I see a Coca-Cola vending machine in the building, which is very popular in Mexico. So I just guess, and it's Mexico. This next round, the feeling of the landscape and this plate on the back of the car and the road lines too all make me feel that it's Italy, with the quite rocky landscape. So I zoom in and guess, and it was Sicily. Okay, here I see the houses look quite coastal and quite South African, so I just guessed towards Cape Town. And here was another tricky round. So the general feel of it feels like Latin America, but it also feels quite cold too. My gut feeling here was that it was just Argentina, and you can see some Spanish in the, I think it's a gas station, or maybe a mechanics. So yeah, my feeling was Argentina, and I had nothing really better to go on. So I just zoom in and click Argentina, and eventually make my guess. I keep looking to see if I can find any more clues, but eventually I just cave in and guess. Okay, here we have a Spanish sign on the car, a black car, and white lines with the sun to our north, which is quite typical for Argentina. And the landscape was quite Argentinian too. I'm just thinking about it here, and I guess. Here we see French on the sign, and it's a French sign. So I just check and guess. So that's 40. Here, my initial feeling is South Korea with the type of road, and then we see South Korean writing. Here we have Thai script and left-hand drive. I'm not too confident on telling the difference between Thai and Khmer, so I generally hinge on the side they're driving on as Cambodia drive on the right-hand side, and this happens to be very close to the border, but still Thailand. Here we see a yellow and red yield sign, which is Polish, and I see some script as well, which looks quite Polish. Here we have left-hand drive again, and it's either Indonesia or Malaysia with the language. And down there I see an Indonesian plate, which is slightly different to the Malaysian plate as it has 3 different sections, rather than Malaysian plates having 2 sections. So yeah, it was Indonesia. Here the road lines and the type of wide road and the bollard there made me think it was Turkey. And these drainage ditches to the side of the road are quite typically Turkish too. So yeah, I eventually guessed, and it was Turkey. Here we have a quite tropical look, and the holes in the poles and the yellow lines down the centre of the road. This green sign in the distance was catching me out as it made me think Bolivia, but all the other evidence was pointing me towards Brazil. So I click there, and this pole is very typically Brazilian too. It was in Pará. Here it says floor in America, so very obvious where that will be. I just look if there's any more evidence I can find. But eventually I go in Pennsylvania, and it was Connecticut. Here we have a yellow rear plate and a French sign, and another French sign there with the Gen 2 coverage. Here we have Gen 4 coverage and Portuguese writing, and a similar landscape to the other round in Mato Grosso do Sul. Here we have a double yellow line down the centre of the road and some English writing. Most of this was just down to my gut feeling, so eventually I guess USA. It's in New Jersey. And the final round, which takes me a long time to figure out. There were just very little clues here, and the landscape didn't make me feel anything in particular. I keep looking at the buildings in the distance, and the sun seems to be in the north, which proves to be my downfall in the end. Looking at the sun's direction when it's fairly central uh, isn't very good to rely on. But at this point, it was pretty much the only thing I could possibly think of. I keep looking at the landscape, and these pine trees, or at least I think they're pine trees, feel like they're either imported or just not native to the area I'm thinking of. Which at this point I was thinking possibly Colombia or Ecuador or Bolivia towards Santa Cruz. I keep looking at the architecture, and these plants in the foreground towards the buildings, uh, they don't look quite familiar to me. So I look in South America to try and jog my memory. But eventually I find out they're agave plants, which are native to Mexico. And we're coming up to the end of the round now. While I was doing this, I did not know the agave plants were native to Mexico. And so eventually I put my guess around Santa Cruz. I had nothing much better to go off, so eventually I just guessed, and yeah, it was Mexico. So, thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something from me from this country streak, and bye.